Hi friends, glad to be back today. And today we're going to be talking about another sign of BPD, and that is a distorted and unstable self-image or sense of self. And this is a big one, and we're going to do a deep dive today. So let's jump in with the concept of identity disturbance. This is important to understand. And the identity disturbance is the inability to maintain one or more major components of one's identity. And those components of the identity are very important to understand. My most important, I feel, most important component, which none of them can stand alone, but most important is the core values. Understanding one's core values. What does somebody stand for? What do you stand for? And this is one of the biggest things that I really push in the work that I do with clients, especially when we're trying to figure out our identity or leaving a certain toxicity and trying to understand where we stand because we haven't had any boundaries or standards for so long, if ever. And so those core values are really understanding, what do I stand for? What are my values? And for example, one of my really main values is independence, but it's independence of thought, action, and emotion, because those are important to me because I should be able to think, how I want to think, and feel how I want to feel, and be who I want to be. And so if somebody was to make fun of maybe my deepest feeling, that would be a boundary issue. That would be something that I wouldn't accept. That would be something that I would, have a conversation as, but not accept them just doing that to me. And so that would be like a standard. And so that's another component of identity, is having those standards and also having those boundaries, which is another component, as well as a sense of continuity, a sense of continuity across a period of time, acting the same way, doing the same things, expecting the same things, having those core values, living by those core values over a period of time. And that's why it's interesting when we start resurrecting the values and understanding, or maybe creating values for the first time, is that helps us to give us a standard and a continuity to live by, and something that we can, look at every day and say, am I living this way? Am I living true to my values? Am I being true to myself? Because if those are honestly my values, then if I'm living by them, I'm being true to myself. And then, lastly, the last component is, who you are to yourself, understanding who you are as a person to yourself, being able to feel comfortable in your own skin and feeling good about you, making the choices that you're making based on your values, based on your standards, and having those boundaries that, resonate with you when somebody breaks one of your core values or go against one of those core values. And so these are important. So those are aspects of a solid self-image, that sense of continuity, those core values, the standards, the boundaries, and really having that sense of self and feeling comfortable in one's own skin. Another aspect of the unstable self-image and sense of self is the emotional dysregulation. And this is very important because this connects directly with the emotional responses, and the emotional responses that don't fall in line with a desirable scope of response to a situation. For example, instead of responding emotionally at the intensity level, what needs to be responded to, it's very much out of sync with the necessary response to that situation. So somebody might, get very angry and start screaming and yelling over something that is maybe not at that level of necessity, or extreme crying and inability to stop crying, those types of things, various different emotional responses that aren't necessarily directly connected to the situation. So it's like over and above the necessary emotional response, or the opposite, quite honestly, where there is no emotional response when something is necessarily needed. So, not being, another side of the coin from that extreme would be, not being able to cry at your mother's funeral. That could be also another thing too. So there's different sides of that coin. Being able to profusely cry at a commercial on TV, but not able to cry at the funeral for your own mom. The other side of that is, yelling and screaming and literally, losing it, honestly, over something that really doesn't call for that. Maybe there could have been a conversation, or maybe a couple of comments could have remedied something, but just kind of going over and above for maybe a long period of time, fighting over a situation that doesn't need that type of emotional response. And so remember, when we get into these type of dysregulation, that also takes us off from who we are. Because then we start getting confused as to, why we're doing this or why we're acting this way. We also feel a little out of control as well, or we don't really understand where we stand or how we feel. And so this is very important to think about. All these aspects directly relate back to the self-image and the sense of self. So let's talk about some observations of somebody that has a distorted or unstable self-image. Shifting goals or dreams. So every other week or whatever, there's a different idea of a goal or a different concept of a dream, or what they want to do when they grow up, or what they want to do when they get older. And this could be at any age, okay? I'm not just talking about, this is not just for young people that haven't grown up. This is for anybody. Having those shifting goals and not really knowing what you want. And that can be great to be able to pursue things or look at things, but eventually we need to find something and kind of connect with that, because otherwise, again, if we have all these shifting goals and dreams, we kind of feel a little out of it. We don't feel like we have a direction or destination, and that can be very challenging as well, going back to that unstable sense of self. Another aspect is the changes to one's opinions. We usually have our opinions, and our opinions, I'm not saying that we can't change opinions, because the idea of being wise is we get more information to change our thought process that might change our opinion about something, and that's great, that's awesome. But changing to one's opinions constantly, not having that consistent pattern of thought or opinion, kind of wavering back and forth, and also maybe changing one's opinion based on who you're around, who the person's around. So maybe when they're around one person, they become more like this, or they're around the other person, they become a little more like that. So they're not consistent in their own opinions, they're kind of taking on other people's opinions as well. Another observation is changing in work. So oftentimes, if somebody has an unstable self-image, they might change jobs a lot. So there might be a lot of job change, a lot of, maybe work here for a couple months, work here for a couple months, but nothing very consistent, because again, not knowing what they want to do. Also, there might be emotional dysregulation too on the job site, which causes some issues that could also cause them to lose their job. So that could also be part of it as well. Also finding fault in coworkers, going from idealization to devaluation to discard with coworkers, or even a boss, could also change the dynamic as work as well. Another aspect is the fluctuating sexual identity. So somebody that's fluctuating between their sexual identity could definitely, this is part of that unstable self-image. They don't know exactly who they are or where they fit into. And so that can also create even more questions than answers for that person, not knowing really where they stand or what they really feel is right for them. And so that it can even create more questioning, especially when you're dealing with people that aren't questioning their sexuality, and they can ask a lot of questions of the person that is questioning their sexuality, making them question their self-image even more, because they don't understand why they're questioning. So again, this can add to more questions than answers. Another aspect is adopting other people's ideas. So it's great to look at other people's ideas and, make changes and really realize things. But again, adopting others' ideas as your own is different. So when we see that disturbance in self-image, we're adopting someone else's ideas a lot of times. Maybe we're regurgitating some of the comments that they make. We might even be actually, a person that's dealing with this could also be making changes to their mannerisms and even their sayings. They could say things that another person says, constantly using their mannerisms or their sayings as well, taking on that other identity that's not necessarily theirs, and not even realize that they're doing it. Another aspect is compromising of values. Again, I brought up the comment about the abandonment piece, that fear of abandonment, the fear of being alone. And so ultimately, if somebody has that fear, they're going to compromise values to be in a relationship. They're going to see all values as kind of gray areas that can kind of fluctuate in and out depending on what works or what doesn't, depending on what can keep the relationship going or what doesn't keep the relationship going. So again, remembering that too is that once we compromise those values, we also compromise our identity. We don't have any standards or boundaries, and we lose ourselves. And this could be with somebody with BPD or not BPD, okay? So this is not just about BPD here. This is about anybody that's compromising their values to stay in a relationship because of the fear of being alone or the fear of abandonment. Another aspect is when they can feel really good about themselves for a moment and other times really hate themselves. So they can go from a concept of liking themselves to self-loathing, and that can also do a number on self-image. Another aspect is adapting themselves to whoever is around. So they can become more of a chameleon, adapting themselves to the people that are around, taking on their mannerisms, even, drinking the same drink, ordering the same food, those types of things is a big consideration. So ultimately, when we look at the distorted, unstable self-image or sense of self, we understand there's a lot of things and a lot of components that go into this. It's not just one thing. And understanding that identity disturbance is very important and the emotional dysregulation is important, but also understanding those components of identity, as well as some of these observations that I brought up too. So if you're dealing with this or you feel like you're dealing with this, or you have a loved one, family member, or friend that's dealing with this, this can really help us to understand, because when somebody is dealing with a distorted or unstable self-image, it's really hard for them to understand themselves, and it can be hard for them to be themselves because they don't really know who they are. And so they're going to ebb and flow a lot. There's also going to be some anger behind that, because if I don't really have a true identity, I'm going to be maybe angry about that, stressed out about that, resentful about that. And especially if I'm taking on other people's aspects, mannerisms, attitudes, that sort of thing, I might be doing that, not realizing that. And that, that can take me even more off target from where I am. As well as if I'm doing that to keep relationships around, if that person leaves, I might be very resentful or angry as well. So there's different aspects here, but really looking at this to understand, is somebody really dealing with that? Because if so, we really have to start off with understanding, first off, our core values, to be able to begin to really make a definition for ourselves, to start feeling solid and safe and comfortable in our own skin. Thank you for watching this video, and if you like the content of this video, please give us a thumbs up here. Also, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, and you can also join the channel and get membership videos for members only as well. So you can just click on that join button and check that out. In the comment section below, let me know, is this something that you are dealing with directly or dealing with a loved one, a family member or a friend? Because this is a very interesting dynamic when it comes into a relationship, whether it's happening through you or someone else. Being able to understand this aspect can really help us to understand not only the relationship issues, but also our personal issues that we need to take care of to stabilize ourselves and to stabilize our identity. Again, I hope this video has helped you. Please share it with family and friends, and don't forget to live your true life.